Welcome to PowerChart INET Training for PCA, Nurse Aide, Nurse Tech new hires. This is a self-paced computer training module that you are required to take. You must complete the full training PowerPoint, take the comprehensive test at the end of training, and then upon finishing the course and the post-test, you need to print the certificate of completion and turn it in to your unit educator. Let's talk about protecting the electronic records, your username and HIPAA. You will be receiving your own username and password for PowerChart from one of your unit administrators. Once you have your username, then you can change your password to a password that only you know, and you should keep it protected. It's very important that you realize once you have that, you should never share that with others. It is your unique electronic signature. Do not leave yourself logged into computers if it's not being used by you, because anyone could document under your name. They could come up behind you and start charting under your username and password. It's also a HIPAA violation because you're leaving patient information unsecured. So again, do not share your password with anyone. We do have a department, the Information Security Department, that is constantly monitoring usage in charts, records, to make sure people who should be getting into the record are, and monitoring consistently those that should not be in the record are not getting into those records. So be sure to secure your computer, log out after use. We are constantly monitoring this. Logging into PowerChart, it's important that you can find the icon on your desktop. It's usually this blue icon as you see on your screen, and it will be labeled as Cerner Web. Once you see the icon, you double click on that, and then you'll see the screen to either click on FirstNet, the red E, or PowerChart, which is that blue P icon. For most users, it will be the blue P that you'll be logging into. Once you've selected this, the Cerner login screen should open. This is where you will type in your username and password. Once you've logged in with your username and password, a time frame selection box will appear. This will ask you what shift you're working, so choose the time frame appropriate for your shift and select OK. Once you're working on your assigned shift, you can select and set a default time frame so that it'll automatically select the time frame every time you log in. So we're going to show you how to do that, and we also have a handout that will remind you. To set this default, you can click on Options, Set Defaults, and then it will open up a time frame selection box as seen here on your screen. Select the time that you want and say OK. The PAL, or the Patient Access List, is a list that you will be utilizing to see the patients you might need to be charting in. Once your PAL opens up, you will be asked to establish a relationship to the patients on your list. So for outpatients areas, you'll be asked to establish a relationship anytime you open up a patient's chart. So depending on your role, you can select your relationship, whether you're a nurse aide, a nurse tech, or a PCA. Once you're logged in, you can open up a patient's chart from the PAL. To log in, all you have to do is double-click on the patient's name to open up the chart. This is what the tracking list for the emergency center looks like. It's a little bit more colorful. It has more icons. It's what they use to notify staff what needs to be done. This is the tracking shell for Family Birthing Center and Family Care Unit. And again, it will have the patient's list, and it has some icons and reminder cues for staff. The next thing we'll talk about here is the patient toolbar, or the toolbar across the top in PowerChart. The first toolbar, it's primarily used to set defaults in your options. That's probably the most selection that you'll use is the option in the first toolbar, so you can set your time frames as we looked at a moment ago. The second line item there, the second toolbar, gives you the ability to move between your PAL, which is the patient access list, and your patient list quickly by clicking on the icons for these two list options. The main difference between the POW and the patient lists, the POW is more interactive. It has more icons and tasks that you can click on and take you to different areas in PowerChart, whereas the patient list is not as interactive. But the patient list does have more demographical information and data about the patient. The third toolbar has some icons that you'll use frequently, but one of them that you might use is this icon called the Team Viewer. This icon is used if the help desk is called and they need to access your computer. They may ask you to click on this icon to help them log in to your computer. The exit icon is a good icon to know its location, and this icon will exit you completely out of PowerChart, and it is used to save any custom settings that you may have created for yourself. So if you created different column sizes, you've rearranged stuff to be how you like it to be, if you use the exit icon, it will exit you out of PowerChart and save your settings. Another icon that might be useful is the calculator icon. It's located to the right of the exit icon. Maybe if you want to calculate a patient's weight from pounds to kilograms or from kilograms to pounds. And there's several different formulas that you can use. Another icon that you definitely need to know its location, and it will be used frequently, is the ad hoc icon. This icon takes you into the ad hoc charting section where you can find different PowerForms to chart that are one-time use forms. So if you need to chart an intake and output, or you need to chart some orthostatic vital signs, you click on ad hoc, then select the orthostatic vital signs, and it will open up the form for you to chart within. Everything that is in ad hoc, in your ad hoc, can be charted within INET. There's some other miscellaneous icons that you may see up on your toolbar. One of them is the search icon. It's a magnifying glass, and it gives you the ability to search for a patient by their FIN or their MedRec number or their name. The FIN is the financial number, and it is usually the best way to search because it's specific to each encounter. The MedRec number, it never changes, but we definitely recommend that you only search using the FIN to keep from charting on a wrong visit. Some other icons, you definitely need to understand the refresh icon. When you click on this, it kind of reloads the page. It kind of refreshes your current screen. The PAL is the only area of the electronic chart that automatically refreshes itself, so it will always say 0 minutes, but in other areas, hit the refresh icon. If you're not seeing what you need to see, if you need to refresh your screen, it's the best way to do that. INET is the grid-like structure that we use for documenting within. So the next bit here, we're going to show you how to document in INET. So what is it? It's basically a structured clinical documentation system that allows you, the nurses use INET, you can chart I's and O's, vitals, hygiene, nutrition, activities of daily living, all sorts of information can be charted within INET. So things like your vital signs, your I's and O's, any hygiene or nutrition. If you bathe your patient, you can chart that in INET. If you weigh them, you can document the weight in INET. So it's very important that you understand how to use it so you can document within it. The other thing we'll talk about are the bands. So just some terminology. You will have a patient care assessment band that has the different line items that you will chart about. Based on your user, you will have different bands that you can set up. Nurses have a lot more bands than you will have at this time. So as a PCA, nurse aide, or nurse tech, this is going to be the only band that you will see within INET, your PCA assessment band. Within that band, there are different sections. There's the vital signs section, the I&O section. You can see the different sections listed there. As you chart, the sections are customized and they save to the patient. Again, the bands saved to the username, so as a nurse aide, nurse tech, PCA, you only have one band, whereas the sections saved to the patient. So if the patient has a temporal temperature, once it's added, that section will show for anyone who opens the patient's chart, they can see that documentation occurred within that section. There are two different ways to chart in INET. It's simply what you're more comfortable with. You can double click in the cell, or you can activate the entire column of a section, and I'll show you what we're talking about. This example here shows that I've double clicked within that cell in that time column for the right line item for the temporal temperature. I've double clicked in that cell and documented the temp was 97.8. Then I green checked over here to sign it off. Data is purple until it has been signed off. Once it has been green checked, signed off, it will turn to black text. This screen example here shows that I've double clicked in the section header, so the blue vital signs header. I double clicked on that to activate all the cells so that I can use my enter key to tab through each one of those cells one by one, or hit the enter or the tab, either one. That's an example of activating the section header. Within PowerChart, right-clicking on a result gives you a lot of options. So if you ever are in doubt, all throughout PowerChart, to figure out what you might need to figure out, you can always right-click over a result or right-click over a charting option. In this example here on your screen, let's say, for example, I realized that I needed to modify that 98. Maybe it was 97 and I mistyped it in. Okay, so I could right click and modify, then it will open up for me to backspace over the error and rechart the correct value. Then I can green check, sign it off. Once I've signed it off, any data that has been modified is indicated with a blue triangle in the bottom right of the cell. So if I'm looking through PowerChart and I see that there's a blue triangle, that's just an indicator that that data had been modified. Another option you have is to unchart data. Perhaps you realize that you charted on the wrong patient. Not a big deal if you recognize your error and unchart the data. So in this example, right-click on the 98.6 and say unchart. Then it will ask you, why are you uncharting these results? And you can select, as you see in the screenshot there, that you charted on the incorrect patient, and then green, as the green arrow is pointing to, you can sign off that form. Once you've signed it off, you will see in that cell an in error appear with a black triangle. And if you hover over that triangle, it will show you the reason that the data was uncharted. So you can see here that this person, Mr. Teach, PCA2, on this date and time, charted on the incorrect patient. That's why it was documented in error. Now, if you charted on the wrong time column, maybe you put that temperature in the wrong time column. It really was a temperature that you took at 7 a.m. Not a big deal. You can change the date and time by right-clicking on the value, say change date and time, and then select the correct date and time in that window there you see circled or squared in pink. That's where you would change the time. Then you can sign it off, and it will move it to the correct location in INET. As you see here, once it's signed off, you'll see the date and time correction in the previous cell, and then you'll see the corrected date or the corrected data in the right time column. A blue triangle will indicate again that data was modified. If you hover over that blue triangle, you can see that there was a date and time correction. Choosing the other option. You always have the option to select other in different documentation cells there, as you see in the screenshot. Maybe none of those vital sign reasons are appropriate, so if you click on the word other, then you can free text in the reason as to why you are taking those vital signs. We try to give you a lot of options that would be appropriate, but if ever you need to free text in a reason, you have that option. Some items in INET may have reference text associated to them, such as policies or instructions or charting guidelines. An example here is some reference text that is identified by the blue text. So the example here, the common oral intake volumes. So if you're trying to remember our typical milk little cartons, they're 240 mils, where a large styrofoam cup is 320, the popsicle is 55. So you can see some of those common values. If you click on the blue oral intake, it will take you to this reference text to help you. A few more things to talk about in INET: the time columns, flags or comments, and then some annotations. Time columns have different default values assigned to your band. So as a patient care assessment band, it defaults to Q 4 hours. So you can see that's how it defaults. But frequencies can always be changed. If you have a patient that you're taking vital signs on more frequently, documenting on more frequently, you can always change these time columns. So as you see in this screenshot here, it's very easy to change the time column. You right-click over the time column and select Q 5 minutes, Q 1 hour, Q 10 minutes, whatever time column you need it to be. You right-click on the time and then select the frame that you would like it to be. So if you need to chart for a specific time, you can right-click anywhere in the time range area and choose Insert Date and Time. So if you want to be very specific, right-click over it and say Insert Date and Time, and you can type in the exact time column that you want to create. So if you want a time column in this example for 0845, type it in, and then you have a column that's bolded just for that time frame, and you can chart as much as you need to for that time. Once you enter in the data, so you've double-clicked in the section header to activate all those cells, you've typed in your values, you've used your tab and enter to scroll through the column, and then you green check, sign it off to turn that purple text to black text. You will notice that it's kind of sucks it back into the default time frame of Q 4 hours. But it is there for that specific time that you marked it for. If more than one set of results are charted in a time range, you'll see the number of results in brackets. So as you see on the screen here, there's 97, and then in parentheses, it's highlighted in yellow, as you see to get your attention, it says parentheses 2. That means there are 2 tympanic temperatures charted within that 4-hour time frame. The most recent value shows up on top. To view the charted values, you can always say right-click and choose Actual, so that it breaks down and you can see that there were vital signs charted at 8:45 and then vital signs charted exactly at 8:50. So you can see that they were given an exact time. INET defaults for your view to be the last 12 hours. But if you need to look back over the last 48 hours, the last 24 hours, you can always change that by right-clicking on the gray banner bar that usually will say last 12 hours, and you can change that to last 48 hours, last 24 hours, whatever it is that you need to see, so that you can scroll through to look at different results that have been charted. Flags can be added to indicate results for other clinicians to be aware of. It's just a visual cue to other people that are in the chart of a value that you want to bring someone's attention to. You also have the ability to comment. It allows for a free text area that you can free text in a comment on a specific element or a specific value in the cell. Column annotations can also be used to document over multiple results. In this example here, you right-click on that elevated temperature and say Flag with Comment. It opens up a free text box for you to document As you see, nurse notified of increased temperature and removed blankets from patients. Then you can say okay, and it signs off that form and attaches it to the value. Now certainly you need to, if it's worthy of putting a flag and a comment with, you want to make sure that you're having face-to-face verbal communication with the patient's primary nurse, but this is a way to document what you did. When the result is signed off, you will see a flag and then a black triangle inside the cell. If you hover over the black triangle, you can view the comment. So you can see just what you documented, that the nurse was notified of the temp and blankets were removed. To add a comment to any value, you just right-click and choose Add Comment. Then opens up a free text box for you to comment. Patient had a high blood pressure, so I retook the blood pressure. Result was still high, so I notified the nurse of this critical result. And sign it off by selecting OK. If the nurse wanted to see your documentation, they could hover over the black triangle. Again, this is a good way to document this, but don't assume that this is a way that they will be notified. You still need to have verbal communication with the primary care provider, the doctor, or the nurse, and then document what you did. Column annotations can be used to document over multiple results. The comment will follow the entire time range. So if you need to make a column annotation about that entire 4 hours, then you'd right-click it, add an annotation, then you could free text in an annotation. As you see here, the patient was agitated, notified the nurse, and will retake when the patient is calm. Then sign it off. Once you sign it off, again you see the black triangle in the upper right hand corner that can be seen over the entire time column. If someone was to hover over the comment, it would open up this yellow box so that you can see what was documented. Now we'll talk about documenting intake and output. Depending on your location that you're working in, you will get direction as to what is expected of you when documenting I's and O's. We do want to teach you how it is done, and then based on your orientation, your preceptor can let you know if you do in fact do it electronically in your area, or if you just give the information to the nurse for the nurse to input the data. It works the same way. The right time column under the right line item, you want to double click in the cell and document the output or the intake. In order for you to document certain I's and O's, a dynamic group must be charted. So if you're trying to document urine output from a urinary catheter, the nurse must first have created a dynamic group for you even to have the line item to document on. Same thing for documenting nasogastric tube input or outtake. The nurse has to have created a dynamic group for you to chart with it. You should never create a dynamic group. This icon should only be selected by an RN or an LVN. And if you're unable to chart your output because there's no dynamic group created, then just ask the nurse to add this. But do not chart until the nurse has created the dynamic group for the right item that you're trying to chart about. In this example here, you can see that no dynamic group has been created. There's no urinary catheter created. But now that the nurse has created the dynamic group, you can see that it's a 16 French indwelling continuous urethral catheter. And you see the output line item there that you could chart on. Once you get the nurse to add the dynamic group, you might need to click on the refresh icon to see the changes. So for you to reload your page and kind of upload anything that anyone else has done, you click on the refresh icon. And then you should be able to see the dynamic group they created. We'll talk about how forms integrate within PowerForms and INET. Data that's charted in a PowerForm flows over into INET. You can use the ad hoc icon to fill out any of the PowerForms, and all the data you chart in these PowerForms via ad hoc will flow into INET. So if you click on, in this example, ad hoc Then select PCA frequent assessment. It opens up the POWERFORM. Once you select the icon, it opens up a form for you to chart. In this example here, it's an orthostatic vital signs POWERFORM. You put in the data that you acquired on your patient, green check signs the form off, and it will flow over into INET. If you hit the refresh button in INET, you will see all those orthostatics flow into INET under the orthostatic section on your patient care assistant band. In this section, the skincare and activities section, it's for documenting any skincare activities that you may do. If you reposition the patient, if you turn them what side they're on, the nurse should be documenting these things, but you also have the ability to document them as well. It's very important that we take care of our patient's skin and we turn them frequently. The activities of daily living section, you can document if they slept good, if you helped them ambulate, anything that you did, you can document here. And again, your documentation requirements are specific to your unit and your orientation, so get clarification on your expectation on your unit. In this section here, you can document their nutritional intake. So if they ate well, how much of their lunch or their breakfast, if they needed feeding assistance, if you assisted them to eat, you could document in this area in INET. And then the hygiene and ADL section, if you helped change their linen, helped them shower, it needs to be documented here. It's very important that we document these things that we do for our patients so that it can show the great and very good care we provide our patients. The next thing we'll talk about is Vitals Link. All med-surg floors and 5 East or the ICCU use the Vitals Link machines. It allows you to take vital signs and send data directly to the patient's medical record using these Welch-Allyn machines. You will receive training upon the floor for the use of those devices, for it to flow into PowerChart, into INET, so you'll get that training on the unit or on your floor. The next thing we'll talk about are the flow sheets. The flow sheet is used most frequently to view patient results, and it's designed to make finding clinical information as effective as possible. You may or may not utilize this section frequently, but it is there for you to see certain results. You do have the ability to look at your PCA view or to view the last 48-hour results. So if you click on that, you can see all sorts of stuff that was charted on your patient within the last 48 hours. The next thing we'll talk about is Form Browser. Form Browser is where you can find documentation that was charted on the patient via a POWERFORM. So certain areas like the ER use a lot of POWERFORMs. You'll see the POWERFORMs in the Form Browser view. You can sort those by date, you can sort them by type, so depending on what you're searching for, you can see certain POWERFORMs here in Form Browser. Just like everything else in PowerChart, you can right-click to get the certain options you need. So if you need to see the documentation on that fall interventions, you can right-click and view. Or if it needs to be modified, right-click and modify. Certainly you only want to modify documentation that's appropriate for a nurse aide, nurse tech, or PCA to modify, and you only want to view documentation that would be appropriate for your job description to be view. To unchart, you can right-click and select Unchart, then a box pops open for you to explain the reason you're uncharting the documentation. Again, you only want to unchart documentation that is appropriate for your scope of practice to be uncharting. If you realize you charted the wrong date and time on a form, you can go into Form Browser and select right-click and say Change Date and Time. So if you need to change it to a few hours ago, and if that happens to be the day before because you're on a night shift, then you can select the previous day and change the time of that form that you charted. The next thing we'll look at is the task list shows tasks that are due on your shift for your patient. You can see in this example that your patient needs admission, vital signs, and demographics. When you click on that task, it opens POWERFORM for you to chart things such as the vital signs, the height and weight. So this POWERFORM opens up when you double click on the task. And you can chart it off by selecting the green check mark to sign off that form. From the task list, once the form is completed, the task will drop off the task list. The charted or completed form can then be viewed in Form Browser. The next thing we'll talk about are orders. The Orders tab allows you to view the patient's orders. It's very important for you to make sure that an order is in place if you're getting asked to do a task. For example, the nurse asks you to get a blood glucose for Mr. Smith, but there is no order for AccuChecks. You can see in the Orders section that there is no order. Always view your orders. If the nurse asks you to place SCDs on patient in 322, you want to make sure that there is an order for the SCDs. Clinical Notes is another section that you can utilize to view completed documentation on your patient. All sorts of documentation flows into the Clinical Notes section. Physician documentation, ancillary staff, nursing staff, it all flows into the different folders within Clinical Notes. To open up documentation for viewing, you just double click on the folder you wish to view. You can also print from this view as well by selecting the print icon if you're trying to get a form for the nursing staff or someone has asked you for something, you can print that out for them. The Patient Care Kardex, or M-Page as some call it, information that's charted pulls into the Kardex based on charting, based on orders, based on all sorts of different documentation pieces. It pulls into the Patient Care Kardex. The electronic Kardex should always be used during shift-to-shift report. So if you're giving report to an oncoming nurse aide, nurse tech, PCA, use the electronic Kardex as a reference for information that you can share. You should also view the patient Kardex throughout your shift. Here is a screenshot of the Patient Care Kardex. You can see it has been color-coded based on preferences. You can see there's the general information section. There's all sorts of different information about the AccuChecks, the diet, the wound care orders. You can see orders that flow into there. It's very user-friendly. You can color code your Kardex. It probably defaults to a gray or just everything to be blue, but you can change your color theme by clicking on the down arrow in the upper right corner of each section on your Kardex and select color theme and then choose the color that you wish for that section to be. You can customize the order of your tabs in Kardex as well. So you can click on the drop down, select drag and drop, and then move around the sections as you would like. You know you're moving them around because the icon will look as you see on the screen here, and you can move those certain tabs around within that page. Once you have moved all the tabs around, make sure to click on the exit icon to save the changes you made. Again, I highly recommend when leaving PowerChart, leave through the exit door. Don't click on the red X window, but rather the exit door. Hopefully, we've answered a bunch of your questions that you may have about electronic charting. If you do have questions, though, please feel free to email or call the IT education coordinators.